Hey, and welcome back, friends. And if you're new here, a high five for you.
Welcome! We're glad to have you.
I'm Travis.
And I'm Adelle.
And we're with the Noble Marriage.
We're here to serve your marriage through authentic, God-centered conversation that's going to point you back to Jesus and hopefully impact and inspire you to be your best self inside your marriage.
Our prayer is through our ministry, your marriage will be impacted with true love and intimacy.
So thank you again for joining us today. Hey, and welcome back. We are on video 6 with Dr. Gary Chapman, where he is actually talking about how our parents influenced our marriage and what did we bring into the marriage from either a positive example or a negative example. So let's listen in.
So I have a question about your love language specifically and how it related to the influences of marriages on you. So like your parents' marriage or your wife's parents' marriage, and did that have an influence on your love language and her love language? Does that make sense?
You know, I don't know how the love language develops. I'm often asked that question. Is it nature? Are you born with it? Or is it nurture? Mm-hmm. And I don't really know. I do know this. You can discover a child's love language by the time they're 4 years old by observing their behavior. My son's love language is physical touch. When he was that age, I would come home from work in the afternoon. He'd run to the door, grab my legs, and climb on me. He's touching me because he wants to be touched.
Yeah.
Our daughter never did that. At that age, she would say, "Daddy, come into my room, I want to show you something." She wanted quality time. She wanted my undivided attention. So it's there very early. And people have asked me different scenarios as to, is this what impacts it? Is that what impacts it? And I don't really know what impacts it. Maybe it's a combination of nature and nurture, but I do know it's there early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey, Haven, our daughter's 7, and hers is physical touch, quality time, all the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
She just wants to be on us all the time, and that's mine as well, so I love that.
We'll ask her, what would you like, or how do you want to be loved? I want to snuggle.
Snuggles.
I want to snuggle. That's all that she wants.
Yeah, it's clear.
Yeah.
If you just observe their behavior.
Yeah.
Adelle and I were talking about last week about how our parents impacted how we show up in our marriage. How do you see that impacting you in your marriage?
Well, I think all of us are influenced by our parents and grandparents, for that matter, if you have contact with grandparents. And we have ideas of what marriage should be like. For example, in the early years, when I was still under the influence of love, the in-love experience, I would give my wife positive words. I would tell her how nice she looks. I'd tell her how much I appreciated what she did. I probably told her a dozen times a day in those early months, "I love you. I am so glad I married you." And one night she said to me, "You keep on saying, I love you. If you love me, why don't you help me?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, you don't ever offer to wash the dishes or vacuum the floors or clean the toilet." And I'm sitting there thinking, my mother did that.
Yeah.
See, I was influenced by my mother. My mother did those things. So I came to marriage expecting my wife to do those things. See?
Him too. He was real disappointed.
I think all of us are influenced in terms of what a marriage should look like by our parents. Now, some people have a negative model. They have parents who yell and scream at each other. And typically, they will say, when they're young and in love, "I'm never going to do that. Never going to yell and scream like my mom and daddy did."
Right.
But if they don't begin to work on themselves, they likely will, because that old saying, like mother, like father, like daughter, like, there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
So we're influenced, but we're not controlled. And that's why we can learn from a negative model.
Meaning we can make a different choice.
Absolutely. My grandfather, for example, was an alcoholic. He lived 2 doors down from us. I was probably 10 years old, maybe 11, and one night a man knocked on our back door and said to my father, "Your dad is up there in a ditch beside the highway, drunk. You better go get him." And my dad said to me, "Get your coat on and let's go help Grandpa." So I went with my dad, and there was my grandfather in the ditch. I got on one side, my dad got on the other, and we picked him up, and we walked him home. He was grumbling the whole time how he didn't need our help.
Right.
Put him to bed. And that was essentially the night I decided I'm not going to mess with alcohol and drugs.
Mm-hmm.
It was a negative example, but you can learn from a negative example.
Yeah.
You can see it and say, I'm not going to walk that road, you know. And so I made that decision, and I've never rescinded that decision. I don't. It's fine. I know you can drink in moderation. I'm not preaching to other people. I'm just saying I made my decision, you know.
Right.
And I found out that a clear brain is a great advantage in life, and that's why when I'm working with teenagers and young people, I'm encouraging them. Look, your brain's not fully developed till you're 25. So don't mess it up with alcohol and drugs in the first 25 years, you know.
Right.
So yeah, I think we are all influenced both negatively and positively by our parents. So we can learn either way.
That's good. Hey, so he talked about how the love languages, he didn't know how it's developed, either through nurture or nature. Like nurture through our parents and we learn from them, or nature, God just gives us that. And I don't know either, but I do know that there is an impact on what we witness in marriages growing up compared to what our marriage should or should not be.
Right.
And specifically for me, I was thinking, I don't know why you won't wash the dishes and clean the house and all that, because you're supposed to.
Right.
I'm supposed to take care of the outside. You're supposed to take care of the inside because my mom did all that.
Uh-huh.
Why don't you do it?
Because in my household, we all shared the dishes. We all did the dishes. And so I'm like, why should I be the one to do it? Why can't you help me? Why can't we all do it together? You know? And we used our dishwasher all the time. So like,
We didn't have a dishwasher.
yeah, so it was more like, who's going to unload the dishes? You know, things like that. But everybody helped out in my household. In fact, we all kind of just did our own like laundry and things around the house that had to do with that person. So I had my own room, you know, I cleaned that, and I wasn't necessarily responsible for the living room unless I messed it up, you know, things like that. And so when I started noticing that there were some expectations and some resentment, maybe some like negative feelings towards me coming from you, I was like, I don't know what your big deal is here. Like, we could all be doing this together.
And how could you know if I don't share those with you?
Yeah.
We never talked about what my expectations were. Expectations can sometimes ruin our lives.
Yeah.
And I never talked to you about my expectations of what I thought you should or should not do based on my belief system about the way that I was raised.
Yeah, your mom did mostly all the things inside the house, and your dad took care of the outside of the house.
And I never talked to them about why they chose to do that. It works for them, and it has worked for them, but I don't know how they were influenced from their marriage.
Right.
Do you think that love languages are nurture or nature, or do you have an opinion?
Well, watching Haven grow up, I've really watched how her love languages kind of change. You know, there's 5 love languages: acts of service, words of affirmation, physical touch, quality time, and gifts. I nailed those. I always forget one typically. And she goes in and out of all of them. She has a few, like physical touch is probably her primary. Because if you ever ask her, what's your favorite thing to do? Snuggles. She wants to be touched and loved and held close. But she's also quality time. Hey, Daddy, can you play with me? Hey, come look at this, you know? She loves gifts. Like, gifts speak to her heart. in a way that she feels important, that somebody thought about her. It doesn't matter what the gift is. It could be something I made her. She's just excited at the thought of a gift. And acts of service, like she's really learning that one as well. And so I almost think it comes from nurture, like which ones are we nurturing more than others? And those ones that aren't nurtured as much, I feel like aren't as big of a love language in the children, in the child.
I can see that.
That's just my personal opinion, just watching Haven grow up.
Yeah, obviously, if Dr. Gary Chapman doesn't know, and he's been doing this for way longer than we have, I don't see how we would know. But it does make sense to me too. Like I was initially thinking nurture, but I don't know either. But I think it's really interesting where he says that at the age of 4, you can determine.
Yeah.
And the importance of learning the other spouse's love language so that you can start speaking it. Because what really changed in our lives when we first learned the book, what really changed in our lives is we started, for me, kind of reluctantly speaking it, and our relationship shifted.
Yeah.
When I started being like, oh, you don't really care about acts of service as much as I do. You don't really care about words of affirmation as much as I do. But you do care about quality time and physical touch. And so when I started leaning into that, you started leaning into, which I thought was really interesting, you started leaning into giving me words of value or words of affirmation. And you started being like, I'm going to help with the dishes and I'm going to help with the laundry. And it was really neat how that happened.
Because when you took that expectation off of me that it was something I should be doing, I should be cooking, I should be doing the laundry, all those things, it gave me the opportunity to want to do them instead, which is a different feeling than feeling like I'm doing it out of like duty, Yeah. Whereas now it's a shift of I want to do those things for you because I see that you feel loved in that way. And I'm still like, do your own laundry.
You are.
And I'm like, Haven, do your own laundry as well.
She's like, here's you a laundry basket. It's for you to have. And that way you won't put yours in mine anymore.
Yep. Exactly. Do you possibly have a negative example as a marriage? I would love to know. Drop it in the comments below that either that you had a positive example or a negative example, and what did you learn from both? I'm always so interested in like how families pass things down, opinions and expectations and all of it.
Because you could choose to like learn a bad example, a negative example, and you could choose to perpetuate that in your life. Yeah. When I think of generational sin, that's what I think of, is taking something that I learned from a past, like a relative or someone raising me,
like
taking that item, and perpetuating that further down the line. Or we could choose to stop that, like using the negative example he's referring to his grandfather, which was a really vulnerable story. Thank you, Dr. Gary Chapman, for sharing that. Using a vulnerable story, being like, I saw that, and I don't think it's going to work for my life in the future, and I'm making a choice right now that going forward, that's not going to be part of my life.
Yeah. Such
a powerful example that we all could use.
Yeah, definitely. So I just want to encourage you, if you had a negative example, that doesn't mean that you don't have hope to do something completely and totally different in your own relationship and marriage.
Yeah, make a choice today.
In the next video, we're going to be exploring another subject around apology and forgiveness. And specifically, he shares 5 apology languages, which I had not heard yet. And it really opened my eyes to our own relationship and how we apologize and forgive each other. So we look forward to seeing you there tomorrow. Bye. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. So not finished yet.
We're here to make a difference and inspire your marriage and other marriages as well. And if you found value in these videos, leave us a comment and let us know what that was so we can make other videos similar to that.
We would love for you to join our community of awesome, like-minded people.
They are awesome.
Go ahead and hit subscribe, and you'll get daily motivational videos that impact your life and inspire you to be your best self. This also helps us get our message out to marriages all over the world. So thank you so much for subscribing and joining our community.